Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Luke Vargas is the UN correspondent for Talk Radio News Service. He is reporting today from Jordan.
This is Luke Vargas for the Talk Radio News Service, reporting from the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan. This camp is only 10 kilometers from the Syrian border, and at night some residents say they can hear shelling. But instead of that making the camp's residents afraid, many say the proximity to their home is precisely what makes Zaatari desirable. Across this camp, there are countless signs that the place is losing its identity as a temporary settlement and becoming a city day by day, if it hasn't already. On a busy street now dubbed the Champs-Élysées, stores abound with a variety of food stands, tools, toys, and household appliances and electronics, such as washing machines and televisions. None of this street was zoned for such commerce, but the camp residents possess purchasing power, and more shops are opening day by day. Humanitarian policy is also changing, taking on a more permanent quality. The World Food Programme recently implemented a food voucher program, the first of its kind in a UN refugee camp, allowing those in Zaatari to redeem food assistance at stores pre-approved by the WFP. In these shops, you can observe the seasonal changes in consumer habits. A female shopkeeper said that this week, walnuts were selling out, the nuts being a key ingredient in a popular dish involving eggplant stuffed with peppers and walnuts. Across the camp, accommodations are also becoming more permanent. Each day, more and more of the tents that were first provided to new arrivals are being replaced by metal sheds, known here as caravans. Many are provided by donor nations like Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Korea, while they can also be purchased for between 250 and 400 Jordanian dinars. That slow transition from temporary to permanent shelter won't be happening at al-Azraq camp, located much further out into the Jordanian desert. Here, the UN and the Jordanian government are placing resettled refugees straight into hardy shelters, designed using lessons learned in Zaatari. 3 months ago, there was nothing here, but with more time to plan, the site is a vast improvement over Zaatari, which was built in only 10 days. A number of tent designs were brought out to this harsh desert environment for testing, but none could withstand the constant winds and the afternoon dust devils, so designs for permanent shelters were solicited. The winning design offers greater privacy, natural light, and ventilation than the structure seen at Zaatari, and every 3 to 4 houses share a common restroom, a significant improvement over the communal toilets and improvised latrines. The camp's manager at al-Azraq says that compared to the sprawl of Zaatari, the arrangement of housing units here represents an improvement in living standards for future residents.
Each village will have its own community center, community police, its health post, schools or child-friendly spaces for each of the villages. So refugees will have close to their living area services provided to them. The idea is to create a sense of community among people when they will arrive.
This camp could open at any time, especially if a sudden humanitarian emergency sent a flood of refugees into Jordan. But as work continues here, the Jordanian government continues to send new arrivals to Zaatari, where a gradual exodus of residents both back to Syria and around Jordan is creating more and more spaces for homes. Nevertheless, the majority of Syria's displaced population, nearly 80%, can be found in Jordan's cities, and that percentage increases every day. More than 1,000 Syrians come here to the UN Refugee Agency's registration center to sign up for services or to renew their registration with the UN and provide current contact and residence information. Hundreds of thousands of Syrians have moved to Jordan's cities, like the capital Amman, but they are the invisible refugees of this crisis. Many frequently change accommodations or move throughout the country, and it's difficult to know how many live in any one place at any one time. In this university neighborhood, a couple and their 4 children have taken up residence in this building, surrounded by students from all over the Arab world. Suleiman Ataal al-Fas was a grocer and a price control monitor for the Syrian government in Daraa, but he lost his livelihood when his store was sacked by the police and he was held up at gunpoint. He says he originally lived in Zaatari camp, but his wife's knee injury was aggravated by the loose gravel of the camp. Here, it's a slight improvement, but he can't afford the 6,000 dinar it would take to provide her with surgery. Suleiman also misses the constant contact with fellow Syrians that he felt in Zaatari.
ما في بسط، ما في راحة، ما في يعني عقلك ما هو واعي. يعني أنا بروح مرات عصويلح، عرفت علي، بروح الطريق هذا عصويلح، بدي أرجع بضيع. ليش؟ العقل ما هو العقل بالبيت بالبلاد عند أولادك عند أهلك، شو يعني لا حول ولا قوة. شو بنسأل.
Talking to Mr. al-Fas in his home and hearing about the other Syrians living nearby, it's easy to feel you're experiencing the Syrian refugee crisis firsthand. But walking back onto the street, it seems to disappear for a moment. Yet, in cities like Amman, you are never far. More Syrians continue to arrive here every day, and the UN predicts those numbers will continue to rise next year. Some will find their way to Zaatari or Al-Azraq, if and when it opens. But the majority will come to Jordan's cities, where they will join an already fierce competition for jobs and affordable housing, all the while searching for a sense of normalcy as the war continues. From Amman, Jordan, this is Luke Vargas for Talk Radio News Service.
Now Luke joins me live from Amman, Jordan. Great work, Luke, with Zach Bedorf. You guys shot the video together, edited it, got this all together in record time for us. So it sounds like you've been having, it seems like an incredible experience, obviously, and it's very interesting to follow this conflict that's happening with Syrian refugees in Jordan. And we're seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, similar dynamics between how the Jordanians are seeing the presence of the Syrian refugees to those conflicts we see with immigrants and refugees all over the world.
Sure. I think in the case of Syria, you have to be especially careful about calling someone who's fled from a conflict like Syria just another immigrant. But in many ways, the conflicts that are erupting in many Jordanian cities, the dynamics that we're seeing there, boil down to some of the same things. We were in the city of Mafraq in the northern part of Jordan the other day, and we saw some incredibly similar dynamics to what perhaps you see in the United States with Mexican immigrants, where there's an influx of labor that is willing to work at a substantially lower cost than the citizens of the home country. There are a lot of things about Jordan, that prove that the government here has been more than generous, but there are just as many conflicts that the Jordanian government is facing with this Syrian refugee influx. I'll say Jordan is among the top 5 most water-scarce nations on the planet. Food prices are very high here because, at least compared to Syria and many other countries in the region, Jordan doesn't produce very much food. There is high unemployment in many of the cities. Housing is very expensive. You can imagine the dynamics that might occur when a population moves into some of these cities, and within a week, in testament to the good work of the UN and other agencies, Syrian refugees are receiving house visits from the UN. They're receiving free health care, they're receiving vouchers for food and rent assistance, whereas their neighbors are feeling the pinch on jobs, but they're also not receiving anywhere near the same type of assistance at all times from their government. That creates some very challenging and contentious dynamics, as you can imagine.
And as we saw, of course, in the video package, a lot of video from the camps, but the reality is that 80% of the refugees are actually in cities, not in the camps. So the idea that they're locationally segregated in some way actually isn't true. Most of them are in cities.
Sure. Not only are the refugee camps the best focal point because they're contained, and there are tons of humanitarian workers there that you can interview and that the media loves to talk to. If you go in the cities, those same humanitarian workers have been instructed by security personnel with the UN and other organizations not to wear identifying clothing because they know it will provoke tensions in cities. So it's harder not only to see the refugees in the cities, but it's harder to see the aid workers who are assisting them. And that makes the job of trying to find the urban refugees and to tell their story all the more difficult.
All right. Well, Luke, listen, I'm sure you've heard of this, but in case you haven't, the Patriots lost over the weekend. It was very, very ugly, and I'm sure you're looking forward to getting back for the next game.
You bet. It's one of the few things I was able to catch of the news from abroad, and it really wasn't the best headline this year.
All right, Luke Vargas, UN correspondent for Talk Radio News Service. Great work with Zach Bedorf, shooting, editing, putting together this great video for us. Have a safe trip home, Luke, and we'll talk to you when you get back.
Thanks very much. It's good to speak to you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.